Red and blue lights cut through the thick midnight fog along U.S. Route 119 like knives. A routine traffic stop was about to tear open a rotting core of corruption that had festered for years behind a county badge. When two hard-edged patrolmen lit up a quiet, ordinary-looking driver for a stop they had invented out of thin air, they thought they had found an easy mark, someone they could push around, humiliate, and maybe shake down. What they never saw coming was that the man behind the wheel of that plain blue sedan was their brand new superior officer, and he was taking notes on every filthy move they made. The rain came down in solid sheets, cold and relentless, turning the black asphalt of Route 119 into a gleaming, treacherous mirror. It was just past 2:12 a.m. in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, a sprawling stretch of land where the polished subdivisions of the northern townships faded into the forgotten industrial corridors and dense, unforgiving pine forests that rolled south toward the mountains. Behind the wheel of a faded 2012 Ford Taurus, Captain Isaiah Grant kept both hands locked at 10 and 2, eyes fixed on the wet road ahead. The rhythmic slap of the wipers was the only sound cutting through the storm and the quiet storm inside his own head. Isaiah was 38 years old and bone-tired in a way that sleep never fixed. 15 years in state law enforcement had carved deep lines around his eyes and taught him that the worst predators often wore the same badge he did. 3 days earlier, he had been sworn in as the new captain of the Westmoreland County Sheriff's Department Internal Affairs Division. The transfer had been quiet, orchestrated by the county commissioners and the state attorney general's office. They had brought him in for one reason only: the East Precinct. For years, the East Precinct had run like a private club with guns and legal immunity. Complaints from the working class and minority neighborhoods on the south side of the county had stacked up like cordwood in locked cabinets. Racial profiling, illegal searches, cash that vanished during traffic stops, and force that went far past what any situation required. The county was one bad video away from a federal consent decree and a multi-million-dollar civil rights bloodbath. Isaiah Grant was the man they had quietly imported to burn the house down and rebuild it clean. Tonight he was completely off the books. No one in the rank and file had seen his face. His appointment was still buried in sealed personnel files. He wore a plain gray hoodie over a white t-shirt, faded jeans, and scuffed work boots. The Taurus was a seized undercover fleet car, unmarked, ordinary, deliberately forgettable. In the dark and the rain, he looked exactly like what the predators of the East Precinct loved to hunt: a black working man driving home alone after a long shift. As he rounded the sweeping curve near exit 42, his rearview mirror suddenly exploded with white light. A Dodge Charger patrol car had closed to within a few feet of his bumper, grille filling the glass. Isaiah checked the speedometer. Exactly 55 in a 65 zone, careful and legal because of the downpour. He hadn't crossed a line. His lights worked. Tags were current. There was zero lawful reason for the hostility. His pulse stayed even, but every professional instinct sharpened to a razor edge. He held his speed. For nearly 2 miles the Charger rode him, weaving slightly inside the lane, the old intimidation dance designed to make a civilian flinch and create the probable cause the cops needed. Isaiah didn't flinch. He signaled cleanly and moved into the right lane to let them pass. The Charger swerved hard behind him again instead. A second later, the light bar came alive, red and blue strobes painting the rain in violent color. The short whoop of the siren cut through the storm. Isaiah let out one slow breath. He signaled, eased the Taurus onto the gravel shoulder far enough to give the officers a safe cushion from traffic, shifted into park, killed the engine, and rolled down every window. The textbook courtesy that made approaching officers feel safer. He flipped on the dome light and rested both empty hands flat on the steering wheel in plain view. Then he watched the side mirror. The cruiser doors flew open. Two figures stepped into the freezing rain. The taller one moved with a heavy, swaggering stride that announced he owned the night. The shorter one kept his hand resting deliberately on the butt of his service weapon. As they stepped into the glow of the streetlights, Isaiah recognized both faces from the personnel jackets he had been studying for a week straight. Officer Brett Colton, Officer Cody Voss. These were the two names that appeared on a grossly disproportionate number of use-of-force complaints out of the East Precinct. Colton, the senior man, had a talent for turning routine stops into violent takedowns. Voss, his younger partner, had a gift for writing reports that magically matched whatever story Colton needed to justify a search or an arrest. A cold, clean focus settled over Isaiah's mind. This was no longer a drive home. This was an active investigation happening in real time. He made the decision in a single heartbeat. He would not badge them. Not yet. He would let them run the full playbook they used on civilians who looked like him. He would document every violation, every lie, every breach of the Constitution. The trap was already set. All they had to do was walk into it. Boots crunched on wet gravel. A blinding tactical flashlight beam slammed into Isaiah's face through the open driver's window. He squinted, turned his head a fraction, but kept his hands glued to the wheel. "Keep your hands right where I can see them, boy." Colton's voice cut through the rain, thick with practiced contempt. The word boy landed exactly as it was meant to, an old, ugly tool for establishing dominance and fishing for a reaction. "My hands are on the wheel, officer," Isaiah answered, voice low, steady, and completely controlled. Colton stepped closer, flashlight still pinned to Isaiah's eyes. On the passenger side, Voss rapped his light hard against the rear glass, then swept the empty back seat. "You know why I pulled you over tonight?" Colton demanded. He leaned in. The smell of stale coffee and chewing tobacco rolled into the car. "I have no idea, officer. I was under the limit and in my lane." "You were swerving," Colton lied without hesitation, tone mocking. "Crossed the center line back there. Looked like you were driving under the influence. Where you coming from at this hour?" "Work, work." Colton dragged the light up and down Isaiah's hoodie. "What kind of work you do dressed like a thug? You look like you're out casing houses." The racial profiling hung in the freezing air like smoke. Isaiah filed every syllable away. "I work late hours," he said. "Is there a problem, officer? I ask the questions here. Understand?" Colton's hand dropped to rest on his duty belt, right next to the taser. "License, registration, proof of insurance, and move slow. You reach for something you shouldn't. We're gonna have a real bad night." "My wallet's in my back right pocket. Registration and insurance are in the glove box," Isaiah narrated clearly. Textbook civilian protocol for dealing with tense or aggressive officers. "Wallet first, slowly." Isaiah kept his left hand on the wheel and used his right to slide the plain leather wallet free. He extracted his state-issued driver's license and passed it through the window. His heavy gold captain's shield stayed locked inside the biometric steel box under the driver's seat, exactly where he had placed it. Colton snatched the card, shone his light on it. "Isaiah Grant." He butchered the first name slightly, smirking. "All right, Isaiah. Now the registration. I'm watching your hands." Isaiah leaned over carefully, opened the glove box, and handed over the fleet registration and insurance card. The vehicle was titled to a state shell company used for undercover work. Perfectly legal, completely unremarkable. Colton glanced at the paperwork, tapped the roof twice. "Sit tight. Don't make any sudden moves." He walked back to the cruiser. Voss stayed at the passenger window, hand still on his gun, rain streaming off his hat, staring at Isaiah with open hostility. They wanted him to sweat. They wanted attitude. They wanted an excuse. Inside the Charger, Colton ran the license. Because Isaiah's transfer was sealed and classified, the state database returned only a clean driver's license. No warrants. Perfect driving record. registration valid. By every legal standard, the stop should have ended there. Colton and Voss did not operate by legal standards. 5 minutes later, Colton returned to the driver's window. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead and seemed only to feed his anger. He did not return the license. "All right, Isaiah," he said, voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. "Here's how this is gonna go. Step out of the vehicle." Isaiah looked up, expression hardening only a fraction. "Officer, my license and registration are valid. I have no warrants. Under what legal pretext are you ordering me out of my vehicle?" Colton's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Civilians, especially ones who looked like Isaiah, did not push back with correct legal language. The surprise flashed into pure fury. "Because I smell marijuana," he lied with practiced ease. "Strong odor of unburnt weed coming from the cab. That gives me probable cause. Now unbuckle and step out of the damn car before I drag you out through this window." It was the oldest, dirtiest lie in the dirty cop toolbox. The phantom smell of drugs. The skeleton key that unlocked the Fourth Amendment. "Officer," Isaiah said, voice dropping an octave, carrying quiet authority. "There are no drugs in this vehicle. I do not consent to any searches. I do not smoke, and there is no odor. If you are ordering me out, I will comply under duress. But I want it on the record that this is an unlawful order." Voss suddenly unholstered his heavy metal flashlight and smashed it violently against the passenger window. "Get out of the car right now, you arrogant piece of trash," he screamed, drawing his weapon and pointing it straight at Isaiah through the glass. "Hands where I can see them. Do it now." The stop had just jumped from civil rights violation to potential deadly force. Isaiah knew one sudden move could put a bullet in his chest. He unbuckled slowly with his left hand, right hand high and empty. "I am stepping out of the vehicle," he announced loudly for any dash camera that might be rolling, and pushed the door open. The moment his boots hit the wet asphalt, Colton grabbed him by the shoulder, spun him, and slammed him chest first against the cold, rain-slicked side of the Taurus. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Isaiah gritted his teeth and gave them nothing. "Spread your legs!" Colton shouted, kicking Isaiah's ankles apart so hard he nearly went down. "You're making a massive mistake," Isaiah said, voice muffled against the metal roof. "Shut your mouth!" Voss yelled, racing around the front of the car. He wrenched Isaiah's left arm up behind his back with unnecessary brutal force. "We got a tough guy here, Brett. Thinks he knows the law. They all think they know the law until they're sitting in lockup." Colton sneered and began a rough, aggressive pat-down. Pockets, waistband, ankles. "Where are the drugs, Isaiah? You hiding a weapon?" "I am unarmed on my person," Isaiah stated clearly. "I do not consent to any search of my vehicle. You have no probable cause." "I told you I smell weed," Colton mocked. Voss left Isaiah in Colton's grip and dove into the driver's seat with open pleasure. He tore through the interior like a man on a mission. The glove box came completely off its hinges, papers scattered. He ripped the center console apart, breaking the plastic latch. A pure fishing expedition, destructive and completely illegal. "Nothing up front," Voss yelled over the storm, tossing Isaiah's jacket onto the wet pavement. He reached under the driver's seat, sweeping hard. Then he stopped. His hand came back, holding something heavy and black, a matte biometric steel lockbox. "Well, well, well," Voss shouted triumphantly, climbing out into the rain and holding the box high. "What do we have here? Looks like our boy Isaiah has a little secret." Colton laughed and shoved Isaiah harder against the roof. "Looks like you're going away for a long time. What's in the box? Drugs? Cash? Stolen pieces?" "Officer Colton," Isaiah said, dropping the civilian act completely. His tone was pure command now, cold, professional, final. "That is a secured container. You do not have a warrant to open it. If you force that box open, you are committing a felony." Voss scoffed and pulled a heavy tactical knife from his belt. I don't need a warrant when I have probable cause of a crime in progress, genius. He jammed the blade into the seam and tried to pry it. When that failed, he looked at Isaiah. Give me the code or the key, now. If you open that box, Isaiah said, turning his head slowly to lock eyes with Colton, your career ends tonight. Both of you. You threatening a police officer? Colton roared, twisting Isaiah's arm higher until the shoulder joint popped with a sickening pressure. You are resisting, Voss shouted. Smash the window and get the crowbar from the trunk. Wait, Isaiah said smoothly. The trap had to close perfectly. If they forced it themselves, it was still an illegal search. But if he warned them and they ignored the warning, it proved willful, knowing malice. The emergency bypass key is on the key ring in the ignition. Use it. Voss smirked, leaned in, grabbed the keys, and fumbled the small silver key into the lock. With a sharp click, the heavy lid sprang open. The smirk died on Voss's face. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, lay a state-issued Glock 19 duty weapon. Beside it, in a pristine leather cutout, sat a heavy gleaming gold captain's shield. Engraved across the bottom, Internal Affairs Division, Westmoreland County Sheriff's Department. Brett, Voss stammered, rain dripping off his nose. He's got a badge and a piece. Colton leaned in, his brow furrowed. For half a second, pure terror flashed across his face. Then arrogance and cognitive dissonance slammed the door shut. You son of a bitch, Colton snarled, yanking Isaiah off the car and slamming him against the side of the cruiser. He slapped the second cuff on so tight the metal teeth cut into flesh and killed circulation. You stole a police weapon and a captain's badge. Isaiah stood tall, rain washing down his face, expression carved from stone. You're accusing me of impersonating an officer and theft of a firearm? He asked, voice clear and loud enough for the dash camera to catch every word. I'm not accusing you. I'm booking you for it, Colton spat, grabbing him by the back of the neck. You're going to a state penitentiary, boy. You messed with the wrong cops tonight. No, Isaiah replied quietly. The sheer authority in the single word made Voss actually take a step back. You messed with the wrong captain. Read me my rights, Officer Colton. Then we're going to take a nice long ride to the precinct. The heavy metal door of the cruiser slammed shut, sealing Isaiah Grant into the hard plastic rear seat. The cuffs bit mercilessly into his wrists. He leaned his head back against the wire mesh and fixed his eyes on the back of Brett Colton's head. Colton threw the car into drive. Tires spun on wet gravel, then caught and launched them back onto Route 119. He left the light bar flashing, but killed the siren. You're a special kind of stupid, Isaiah, Colton sneered over the roar of the engine and the hammering wipers. He glanced in the rear view. You really thought you could boost a captain's shield and a state-issued sidearm and just cruise around Westmoreland County? What were you going to do? Pawn it? Flash it to get out of a ticket? Isaiah said nothing. He was running a mental checklist, cataloging every procedural failure: unlawful stop, fabricated violation, illegal search and seizure, unlawful detention, assault, failure to Mirandize. The chain of evidence was already unbreakable and growing by the minute. In the passenger seat, Voss was silent. He turned the gold shield over and over in his hands under the passing streetlights. The weight, the detail on the eagle, the enamel on the state seal. It did not look like any replica he had ever seen. The serial number on the Glock matched a law enforcement block. Brett, Voss murmured, barely audible. This shield, it's heavy. The details are perfect. And the serial on the gun. So he broke into a cop's house or hidden evidence locker, Colton snapped, waving a hand. Who cares? It just means the DA is going to bury him under the jail. Theft of police property, impersonating an officer, possession of a stolen firearm. We're getting commendations for this. We just pulled a major felon off the street. I don't know, man, Voss whispered. His earlier bravado was evaporating. He looked back at Isaiah. Their eyes met. There was no panic in the prisoner's gaze, no begging, no anger, just cold, patient calculation. A sudden icy shiver ran down Voss's spine. Real thieves with stolen police gear usually panicked. Isaiah was simply waiting. "Stop sweating, Cody," Colton barked, taking a sharp turn onto Chestnut Street without signaling and throwing Isaiah hard against the door. "He's nobody." 10 minutes later, the cruiser rolled into the secured rear lot of the East Precinct. The building was a brutalist concrete block, scarred by decades of hard use and chronic underfunding. Colton parked aggressively in the sally port, cut the engine, and hauled Isaiah out by the bicep. "Let's go, Captain," he mocked, shoving him toward the heavy steel doors. "Let's get you booked." They marched into the precinct. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow over scuffed linoleum. At 3:27 a.m., the bullpen was nearly empty. A handful of night shift deputies hunched over reports or nursing cold coffee. Behind the raised wooden desk sat Sergeant Dale Whitaker, a 20-year veteran with a graying mustache and permanent exhaustion etched into his face. "What do we have, Colton?" Whitaker asked without looking up from a crossword. "Another public intox?" Colton boasted loud enough for the whole room to hear. He shoved Isaiah against the booking counter. "Got a real genius tonight. Caught him swerving on 119. Pulled him out because the car smelled like a reggae concert. Guess what we found under his seat?" He slammed the Glock 19 and the gold captain shield down on the wood. The heavy metal clattered. Every head in the room turned. Whitaker finally looked up. His eyes dropped to the gun, then to the gold shield. He frowned, picked up the badge, and rubbed his thumb across the engraving. "He's got a stolen piece and a stolen badge," Colton continued, leaning on the counter with a smug grin. "Claims it's his. You believe the nerve of this guy? Throw him in holding, Sarge. I'm going to take my time writing this one up. Make the charges stick like glue." Sergeant Whitaker said nothing. He turned the badge over, studied the specialized serial number stamped into the brass, then slowly logged into the statewide secure personnel database, a system accessible only to senior desk sergeants and command staff. He typed the number. The screen flashed a bright red banner. "Classified personnel. Internal Affairs Command. Level 1, clearance only." Whitaker's blood ran cold. He bypassed the warning with his senior authorization. A high-resolution photograph loaded. A man in a crisp dress uniform. Silver eagle on the collar. The exact same gold shield on his chest. Whitaker looked at the screen. Then he looked at the man standing in handcuffs in a soaked gray hoodie and dirty jeans. The face was a perfect match. Color drained from the sergeant's face. He looked at Colton, who was still grinning, completely oblivious to the nuclear device he had just wheeled into the station. "Colton," Whitaker said, voice dropping to a hoarse whisper, "where did you make this stop?" "Route 119 near exit 42. Why?" Colton's smile faltered at the raw terror on the sergeant's face. Whitaker didn't answer. He picked up the desk phone and dialed a 4-digit extension. 3 rings. A gruff voice answered. "Commander Langley," Whitaker said, voice trembling. "I need you at the front desk right now." "Yes, sir. It's a code black." The bullpen fell dead silent. Code black was not an official radio code. It was precinct slang for a catastrophic internal disaster. The few officers present stopped typing. Voss, standing a few feet behind Colton, looked like he was about to be sick. "What are you doing, Whitaker?" Colton demanded, arrogance finally cracking into nervous aggression. "Just book the guy. He's a thief." "Shut your mouth, Brett," Whitaker snapped, voice cracking like a whip. "Do not say another word. Do not move." Before Colton could protest, the heavy wooden door to the command offices swung open. Commander Victor Langley stormed out, a massive man built like a former linebacker, dress slacks and white shirt with sleeves rolled up, furious at being dragged from his office at nearly 3:30 in the morning. "What the hell is going on out here, Whitaker?" Langley barked, marching toward the desk. "This better be good." "Sir," Whitaker said, stepping aside and pointing a shaking finger at the man in handcuffs. "Look." Langley's eyes shifted to Isaiah. The commander stopped dead. The anger vanished, replaced by pure, unfiltered horror. Langley had sat in the closed-door meetings with the commissioners and the State Bureau all week. He was the only man in the building who knew exactly what the new internal affairs captain looked like, and exactly why he had been brought to Westmoreland County. Langley looked at the soaked hoodie and the tight handcuffs. Then he looked down at the desk, at the Glock and the gold shield sitting next to Colton's hand. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Commander, we caught this guy with stolen police property," Colton started, still trying to salvage his glory. "I pulled him over." "Silence!" Langley's roar echoed off the concrete walls hard enough that Colton physically recoiled. Langley turned back to Isaiah, posture shifting instantly from command to rigid subordination. "Captain Grant," he said, voice tight with panic. I am so incredibly sorry. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding." The bullpen gasped as one. The words "Captain Grant" hung in the stale air like a death sentence. Colton's jaw dropped. He looked at Langley, then at Isaiah. Blood drained from his face until he was a sickly gray. "Captain? Commander, what are you talking about? He's a civilian. Look at him." Isaiah finally moved. He stood up straight, posture changing completely, shedding the weary civilian persona like a second skin. He did not look angry. He looked clinical, and that was infinitely more terrifying. "Sergeant Whitaker," Isaiah said, voice ringing with absolute, undeniable authority. "Come around this desk and remove these handcuffs immediately." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Whitaker scrambled, grabbing cuff keys from his belt. His hand shook as he unlocked the metal bracelets. Isaiah rubbed his wrists slowly, feeling the blood rush back into the deep red grooves the cuffs had left. He said nothing. He walked to the booking desk, picked up his Glock, checked the chamber, and slid it into the waistband of his jeans. Then he picked up the gold shield. He did not pocket it. He clipped it directly onto the collar of his wet hoodie. The gold flashed violently under the fluorescent lights. He turned slowly to face Colton and Voss. Voss was trembling, staring at the floor, completely broken. Colton stood frozen, brain desperately rejecting reality. "Officer Brett Colton, Officer Cody Voss," Isaiah said, voice cold, precise, and empty of mercy. "As of this exact moment, you are both stripped of your police powers. You are suspended without pay pending an immediate top-down criminal investigation by the Internal Affairs Division." "Captain, wait," Colton stammered, hands rising, arrogance shattered. "We didn't know. You weren't in a marked car. You weren't in uniform. We thought you were just some guy. If we knew who you were, if you knew who I was, you would have treated me with respect," Isaiah interrupted, taking one slow, deliberate step toward Colton. The height difference was nothing, but Isaiah's presence completely dwarfed the patrolman. "But because you thought I was just some guy, you decided the law didn't apply to you." He pointed a finger at Colton's chest and listed the charges with machine gun speed. "You initiated a traffic stop without probable cause. You fabricated a moving violation. You subjected me to an unlawful search of my vehicle based on the fictitious smell of narcotics. You damaged state property during that illegal search. You detained me under false pretenses. You subjected me to excessive force, physical assault, and unlawful use of restraints." He took another step, voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You didn't make a mistake, Colton. You executed a standard operating procedure. A procedure you have used on dozens, maybe hundreds of innocent civilians in this county. The only difference tonight is that you pulled over the one man who has the power to destroy you for it." "Commander," Colton pleaded, looking desperately at Langley. "Tell him we were just doing proactive policing. It was a dark road. He looked suspicious." "Do not look at him," Isaiah commanded. You answer to me now, Sergeant Whitaker. Yes, Captain Grant. Whitaker stood at rigid attention. Relieve these men of their duty belts, their weapons, their badges, and their radios. Once they are disarmed, place them in separate holding cells. They are not to speak to each other. They are not to make any phone calls. And I want the dash cam and body cam footage from their cruiser downloaded and handed directly to me on an encrypted drive within the next 5 minutes. If 1 second of that footage goes missing, I will arrest everyone in this room for evidence tampering. It'll be done, sir, Whitaker said, moving quickly toward Colton. You can't do this, Colton shouted, fear finally giving way to desperate, cornered anger. You set us up. This is entrapment. Entrapment requires me to coerce you into committing a crime you wouldn't otherwise commit, Isaiah replied coldly. I didn't make you pull me over. I didn't make you lie about my driving. I didn't make you pry open my lockbox. All I did was sit in my car and watch you dig your own grave. Hand over your belt, Colton. Colton hesitated, hand resting near his sidearm. The tension in the room spiked. Every officer in the bullpen subtly shifted weight, hands drifting toward their own weapons. If Colton drew on an internal affairs captain inside the precinct, the night would end in blood. Brett, don't, Voss whispered, voice cracking. He unclipped his own duty belt and let it drop with a heavy thud. He unpinned his badge and placed it on the counter. It's over, man. Just do it. Colton looked around the room. He saw no allies, only the hard, unforgiving stares of men who suddenly understood the old ways were dead. Slowly, hands shaking with rage and humiliation, he unbuckled his belt and slammed it onto the desk next to Isaiah. Take them to holding, Isaiah instructed. As the 2 disgraced officers were marched away, stripped of power and dignity, Isaiah turned to Commander Langley. Commander, he said, straightening his hoodie, gold badge gleaming. We need to talk about your division, my office, now. The door to Commander Victor Langley's office clicked shut, cutting off the stunned hum of the bullpen. The room was stifling, thick with the smell of stale coffee and raw panic. Langley sank into his heavy leather chair, massive frame suddenly looking hollowed out by the disaster that had just walked through his front doors. Isaiah did not sit. He stood in the center of the room, water still dripping from the hem of his hoodie onto the worn carpet. He carefully removed the Glock from his waistband, dropped the magazine, ejected the chambered round, and placed the weapon safely on Langley's mahogany desk. The gold captain's shield stayed pinned to his chest, catching the dim glow of the desk lamp. Captain Grant, Langley started, pulling a handkerchief and dabbing his sweating forehead. I want to personally assure you that this is an isolated incident. Brett Colton and Cody Voss are bad apples. We've had our suspicions, of course, but nothing concrete. I'll draft their termination papers tonight. We can allow them to quietly resign in lieu of termination, to avoid a public scandal that would hurt the department's image. Isaiah stared at him, expression completely unreadable. The silence stretched for a long, agonizing minute. Resign in lieu of termination, Isaiah repeated softly, the words dripping with absolute contempt. You think I came to Westmoreland County to protect your public relations, Commander? You think I sat in the freezing rain taking physical abuse from your rogue deputies just so you could offer them a quiet retirement with their pensions intact? Captain, if this goes public, the federal scrutiny is already here, Victor, Isaiah interrupted, voice a low, dangerous rumble. That's why the commissioners brought me in. That's why the State Bureau bypassed your entire chain of command. You have over 80 civilian complaints filed against the East Precinct in the last 14 months. Unlawful searches, missing cash during traffic stops, excessive force. You buried them all under the guise of internal reviews. You let this rot spread. A heavy knock interrupted them. Sergeant Whitaker entered, carrying a secure, encrypted flash drive. He kept his eyes on the floor and handed it to Isaiah with trembling hands. The dash cam and body cam footage, Captain. Uploaded and isolated. Thank you, Sergeant. Dismissed. Isaiah turned to Langley and pointed at the commander's computer. Plug it in. We are going to watch this together. Langley obliged, hands shaking, as he inserted the drive and opened the encrypted files. The screen flickered to life. Rain-slicked Route 119, the storm roaring. Isaiah watched methodically. He watched his own Taurus pull over. He watched Colton and Voss exit. But he wasn't interested in the visual assault. He had lived that. He was listening to the cabin audio from the moments before the lights came on. Pause, Isaiah ordered suddenly. Go back 40 seconds. Boost the audio gain on the internal cabin microphone. Langley adjusted. The audio hissed over the sound of the wipers. Colton's voice crackled through the speakers. Look at this beater. Late model Taurus. Out-of-state plates, dark tint. Let's run a 1054. Looks like a heavy payout. You sure, Brett? Voss replied, sounding nervous. Foster wants his cut by tomorrow. Foster gets his cut when I get mine. Hit the lights. Isaiah's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. He reached over and hit pause himself. The office fell, dead silent. A 1054, Isaiah said, voice deadly quiet. Standard dispatch code for an animal carcass on the highway. But that's not what they were talking about, was it, Commander? Out-of-state plates, dark tint, heavy payout, and a cut going to Foster. Langley looked completely sick. He recognized the name instantly. Lieutenant Carl Jennings, shift supervisor for the Midnight Patrol, the man who signed off on every arrest report and evidence log for the entire division. They were hunting, Isaiah deduced, the grim architecture of the corruption locking into place. This wasn't just racial profiling. This was an organized civil asset forfeiture ring. Your deputies are profiling out-of-town drivers, fabricating probable cause, illegally searching their vehicles, and stealing their cash under the guise of seizing drug money. And they're kicking a percentage up to Lieutenant Jennings to make sure the reports disappear. Captain, I had absolutely no idea, Langley pleaded, gripping the edge of his desk. I swear to you, your ignorance does not absolve you of your incompetence, Commander, Isaiah snapped. He grabbed the flash drive and pulled it from the computer. Do not leave this office. Do not touch your phone. If you attempt to contact Lieutenant Jennings, I will charge you with obstruction of justice and accessory to a criminal syndicate. Isaiah marched out of the office and headed straight for the holding cells in the basement. The air down there was damp and smelled of industrial bleach. He bypassed the main holding area and stepped into interview room A, a small gray concrete box with a single metal table and a heavy ring bolted to the floor. Officer Brett Colton sat handcuffed to the ring. His uniform shirt was untucked. His hair was a mess. The previous arrogance had vanished, replaced by the hollow, terrified stare of a man who finally understood his life was over. Isaiah walked in, pulled out a metal folding chair, and sat across from him. He tossed the encrypted flash drive onto the center of the table. It landed with a sharp metallic clatter. I am going to make this very simple for you, Brett, Isaiah began, tone stripped of all emotion. You are not facing administrative charges. You are not facing a simple suspension. You are currently looking at a minimum of 15 years in federal prison for deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault, and armed robbery. Colton flinched, color drained further from his cheeks. I want my union rep. I want William Carter. You can have William Carter, Isaiah replied smoothly. But William Carter cannot save you from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And he certainly cannot save you from the audio recording I just pulled off your cruiser's hard drive. Colton's eyes darted to the flash drive. His breath hitched. I heard the conversation, Isaiah continued, leaning forward, invading Colton's space. I heard you call a 1054. I heard you mention Lieutenant Jennings and his cut. I know exactly how your operation works. You target vulnerable people. You smash their cars. You terrorize them. And you steal their money. You thought you were untouchable. It wasn't my idea, Colton stammered, voice breaking. The tough guy facade crumbled completely under the crushing weight of reality. I don't care whose idea it was, Isaiah said coldly. I care about who is running it. Right now, Cody Voss is sitting in interview room B. He is a younger, weaker man than you, Brett. My team is about to offer him a plea deal. The first man to give me Lieutenant Jennings, the first man to hand over the ledger and testify against the entire syndicate, gets state immunity. The other man goes to a maximum security federal penitentiary where former cops do not survive. It was a classic prisoner's dilemma, executed with surgical precision. Colton panicked. The loyalty among thieves evaporated in an instant. Jennings! He practically screamed, pulling against the handcuffs. It's Jennings! He runs the whole thing. He flags the cars he wants us to hit based on out-of-state database pulls. He tells us which stretches of the highway have blind spots for the traffic cameras. We bring him the cash. He takes 60% and washes the complaints from the system. He keeps a ledger in a firebox in the trunk of his personal SUV. I can give you the exact license plate. Isaiah didn't smile. He simply pulled a miniature digital recorder from his pocket and pressed stop. You have the right to remain silent, Mr. Colton. I highly suggest you start using it. By 5:04 a.m., the storm had broken, leaving the sky over Westmoreland County painted in bruised shades of purple and gray. But inside the East Precinct, a different kind of storm was just making landfall. Isaiah Grant stood in the precinct's secured rear parking lot, the cold morning air biting at his face. He had traded his wet hoodie for a tactical ballistic vest with Captain emblazoned in bright yellow letters across the back. Beside him stood District Attorney Owen Sinclair, a stern, unyielding man holding a thick stack of freshly signed no-knock search and arrest warrants. Behind them, 3 unmarked black vans pulled into the lot. Doors slid open in unison, and 20 heavily armed agents from the State Bureau of Investigation poured out, moving with silent, lethal efficiency. They were the state's elite anti-corruption tactical unit, and Isaiah had authorized their deployment directly through the governor's office. "Are we green, Captain?" the tactical lead asked, chambering around in his rifle. "We are green," Isaiah confirmed, checking his watch. "Lieutenant Jennings is scheduled to end his shift and return to the precinct in 10 minutes. Secure the exits, lock down the armory, seize all physical servers and the evidence locker. Nobody makes a phone call. Nobody leaves the building." "Copy that. Move." The tactical lead barked the order. State agents breached the rear doors of the precinct and flooded the hallways like a black Kevlar tidal wave. Morning shift officers just arriving with coffees and donuts were instantly pinned to the walls, disarmed, and ordered to their knees. The sheer shock and awe of the operation paralyzed the corrupt precinct. Decades of systemic abuse and unchecked power were being dismantled in a matter of seconds. Isaiah walked calmly through the chaos, heading straight for the records room at the back of the building. He had sent Sergeant Whitaker to casually inform Lieutenant Jennings that there was a discrepancy in his recent evidence logs. The perfect bait. Isaiah pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the records room. The industrial paper shredder in the corner was humming violently. Lieutenant Carl Jennings, a wiry older man with cold, sunken eyes, was desperately feeding thick stacks of paper into the machine. "Destroying evidence is a federal offense, Lieutenant." Isaiah's voice cut through the noise of the shredder. Jennings spun around, hand instinctively dropping toward his holstered weapon. Before his fingers could brush leather, Isaiah's Glock was drawn and aimed squarely at the center of his chest. State Bureau tactical agents poured into the room behind Isaiah, leveling 4 assault rifles at the lieutenant. "Take your hand off the weapon, Carl. Slowly," Isaiah ordered, voice echoing with absolute finality. Jennings froze. He looked at the laser sights painting his chest, then up at the unfamiliar black man standing before him, wearing a captain's shield Jennings had never seen before. Realization dawned slowly, sickeningly. The rumors of an internal affairs sweep had been true, and it was too late. Slowly, Jennings raised his hands above his head. "You don't know what you're doing," he spat venomously, as two agents slammed him against the filing cabinets and stripped his weapon. "You think you can just come into my house and tear it down? I have friends in the state capitol. You're committing career suicide. Your friends are currently being indicted by District Attorney Sinclair in the lobby," Isaiah replied, stepping forward to switch off the paper shredder. He reached into the bin and pulled out a half-shredded document, a deposit slip for an offshore account. "And this is not your house anymore. It belongs to the citizens you swore to protect, and you betrayed them." He looked at the tactical agents. "Get him out of my sight." As Jennings was frog-marched out of the room, handcuffed and disgraced, Isaiah walked back into the main bullpen. The scene was surreal. More than a dozen corrupt officers, the men who had terrorized the minority communities of Westmoreland County for years, were sitting on the floor in zip ties, stripped of their badges. Commander Langley sat in his office with his head in his hands, waiting for his own inevitable forced retirement and obstruction charges. The fraternity of silence had been completely shattered in a single night. Isaiah walked over to the front desk. Sergeant Whitaker, who had fully cooperated with the raid, stood nervously by the computer terminals. "Captain Grant," Whitaker asked quietly, looking around at the dismantled precinct. "What happens now?" "Now, Sergeant," Isaiah said, looking out the front glass doors as the first rays of morning sun finally broke through the clouds. "Now we rebuild from the ground up. We hire cops who actually want to be cops, not thugs with a state-sponsored license to steal." Local news vans were already pulling up to the perimeter tape outside. The story was breaking. Westmoreland County East Precinct raided. Massive corruption ring busted by undercover internal affairs captain. The citizens of the county were waking up to the news that the predators who had stalked their streets in patrol cars had finally met their match. Isaiah Grant took a deep breath. The exhaustion of the night finally settled into his bones, but there was no time to rest. The trap had sprung flawlessly. The poison had been extracted. But the real work, the hard, grueling work of restoring justice and trust to a broken community, was only just beginning. He unclipped the gold shield from his tactical vest, polished the brass with his thumb, and pinned it securely to his chest. He wasn't hiding anymore. The predator had become the prey, and Captain Isaiah Grant was here to stay.